Montana is enormous, genuinely properly massive. To truly grasp its scale, you have to look beyond the maps and numbers and imagine what it means to live in a place where the land seems to stretch on forever. Montana is the fourth largest state in America, covering over 147,000 square miles. That's nearly 380,000 square kilometers, an expanse so vast it could swallow entire countries whole. You could pick up Germany, a place known for its rather serious and sizable cars, and plonk it down inside Montana's borders with room to spare. In fact, you could fit several European nations inside Montana and still have space left over for a few national parks. Yet for all this epic scale, there's nobody here. Well, almost nobody. The land is so open and so empty that you can drive for hours and see nothing but the wind rippling through the grass. The population is just over 1 million people. That's fewer people than many American cities, scattered across a landscape the size of a small country. To put that into perspective, the city of Houston in Texas has more people living in it than this entire sprawling state. Imagine the energy of a metropolis, then imagine it spread so thin you could walk for miles without seeing another person. It's a place of staggering emptiness, a land of immense horizons and very few humans to look at them. The silence here is so complete you can hear your own thoughts echoing back at you. This lack of people gives Montana a feeling of profound desolation. In the early days, settlers would write home about the loneliness, the endless sky, and the sense that the land itself was too big to ever truly belong to anyone. The official term is low population density, which is a fantastically boring way of saying you can drive for hours without seeing another soul. In fact, there are entire counties here with fewer than one person per square mile. On average, you get about 3 people for every 4 square miles. That means your nearest neighbor might be a rancher whose house is just a speck on the horizon. Compare that to a state like Michigan, where you'd find a comparatively bustling crowd of 69 people in the same amount of space. Here, the land dwarfs the people. Montana is the third most deserted state in the whole country, beaten only by the icy wilderness of Alaska and the windy plains of Wyoming. Historically, this isolation shaped the state's character, rugged, self-reliant, and wary of outsiders. It's a land built for solitude, whether you want it or not. In the 1800s, trappers and prospectors would vanish into the wild for months, sometimes years, returning with stories of blizzards, grizzlies, and the endless quiet. The sheer scale of the place is hard to wrap your head around. In some counties, the postman might drive 100 miles just to deliver a handful of letters. You can travel from the rolling eastern prairies to the jagged western mountains and feel like you've crossed 3 different countries. The landscape changes, but the emptiness remains. The sky is so big it feels like a physical presence, pressing down on the endless fields and forests. Cowboys used to call it Big Sky Country, and it's easy to see why. This emptiness is part of the state's famous beauty, the very thing that draws people to pictures of it. The rivers run clear, the forests stretch unbroken, and the mountains rise like ancient sentinels. They see the pristine rivers, the untouched wilderness, and the majestic peaks, and think, I want a piece of that. But the reality of living here is something else entirely. But living in that picture is a different story entirely. The nearest grocery store might be an hour's drive away, and if your truck breaks down, you better know how to fix it yourself. The same emptiness that looks so peaceful on a postcard can feel deeply isolating when your nearest neighbor is a dot on the horizon. For some, that's freedom. For others, it's a test of endurance. So you have this paradox, a place of world-class beauty that remains stubbornly unpopulated. The land is generous, but it demands a lot in return. It's not because people haven't discovered it. They have. Explorers, ranchers, and dreamers have all tried to carve out a life here, drawn by the promise of space and solitude. The problem is that beauty doesn't pay the bills, it doesn't keep you warm, and it certainly doesn't fix your car when it breaks down on a deserted highway 50 miles from the nearest mechanic. In winter, the cold can be punishing, and in summer, the distances can feel endless. The state's vastness is both its greatest asset and its most significant burden. It offers a kind of freedom that's hard to find anywhere else, but it also means you're on your own when things go wrong. It offers a sense of freedom that is almost impossible to find anywhere else in the modern world, but it comes at a price. The land rewards those who are resourceful, independent, and tough enough to handle its challenges. And as we'll see, that price is often far higher than most people are willing or able to pay. Montana's colossal size and tiny population have shaped not just its landscape, but the very way of life for those who call it home. You'd think in a state with more land than people, finding a place to live would be easy. Montana's endless plains and mountains seem to promise space for everyone, a place where you could stake your claim and build a life without breaking the bank. You'd imagine you could buy a modest house with a patch of land, maybe even enough for a vegetable garden, all for a price that makes sense. But the reality is far harsher. The dream of home ownership in Montana has become a mirage for most, slipping further away each year. In a twist of economic logic that would baffle even the sharpest minds, Montana was recently named the least affordable state in America to buy a home. That's right, less affordable than California, New York, or Hawaii. It's a housing crisis of epic proportions, unfolding in a place where the land seems limitless, but the opportunities to own a piece of it are vanishing. The numbers are staggering. The average price for a house in Montana has soared to the nearly $650,000. That's not for a luxury property, but for an ordinary home, one that a decade ago might have sold for a fraction of that price. This isn't just a Bozeman phenomenon. Across the state, from Missoula to Billings, the average home is now out of reach for most Montanans. Let's break down the numbers. The median family income in Montana is about $72,000 a year. That's before taxes, before health insurance, before the cost of living eats away at every paycheck. For a family earning that amount, the dream of buying a home at today's prices is just that, a dream. Financial experts say you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing, but in Montana, that rule is impossible to follow. To comfortably afford a $650,000 home, a family would need to earn over $172,000 a year, more than double the median income. For most Montanans, that means the door to home ownership is slammed shut. The average family can't even dream of affording the average house. The roots of this crisis run deep. During the pandemic, a wave of newcomers arrived, remote workers from California, Washington, and beyond, flush with cash and eager for a new start under the big sky. They came in droves, often paying in cash, outbidding locals and sending property values into the stratosphere. For long-time residents, it was like watching their own communities being auctioned off to the highest bidder. The result? A classic case of supply and demand, but on steroids. Prices shot up faster than wages could ever hope to keep pace. Between 2010 and 2020, Montana's population grew by 10%, but the number of homes increased by only 7%. New construction lagged far behind the influx of new residents. Then, from 2020 to 2023, the population jumped another 5%, pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. The state simply couldn't build homes fast enough. The people hit hardest are the backbone of Montana: teachers, mechanics, nurses, and other essential workers. They're being priced out of the very communities they serve. They're forced to compete with buyers who see a $650,000 home as a bargain compared to Silicon Valley or Seattle. For them, Montana is a steal. For locals, it's a heartbreak. This has created a deep rift in the state, a sense of invasion by outside wealth, and a growing resentment among those who feel left behind. The local economy simply can't support these prices. Small businesses struggle to find workers who can afford to live nearby. Communities hollow out as lifelong residents are forced to move away. Historically, Montana's wealth came from the land, minerals, timber, and crops. These industries built towns and provided steady work for generations. But those industries have faded. Mines and mills have closed, and the jobs they provided have vanished, leaving behind empty buildings and shrinking towns. Today, most Montanans work in the service sector, waiting tables, cleaning hotel rooms, or working retail. These jobs rarely pay enough to cover the cost of a mortgage, let alone save for the future. The state's average wage is only about 72% of the national average. That gap makes it nearly impossible for locals to keep up with the rising cost of living. Many Montanans now work 2 jobs just to scrape by, watching as out-of-state buyers snap up the homes their families have lived in for generations. The sense of loss is profound. It's a cruel irony, living in one of the most beautiful places on earth, but being unable to afford a roof over your head. The Montana dream is slipping away, replaced by a harsh new reality. Policymakers have tried to respond, proposing affordable housing initiatives and zoning reforms. But progress is slow and the scale of the crisis dwarfs the solutions so far. Over the decades, Montana has weathered booms and busts, but never a housing crisis like this. The story of unaffordability here is a story of economic forces, policy failures, and the relentless march of change. For many, the only option is to leave, packing up memories and moving on, hoping for a better future somewhere else. The cost of Montana's beauty, it turns out, is paid by those who can no longer afford to stay. If the housing prices don't scare you off, the weather probably will. But to truly understand Montana's harsh winters, you have to look back, way back, to a time when this land was shaped by forces far more powerful than any blizzard. Montana's beauty comes with a savage, teeth-chattering, soul-crushing winter that seems to last forever. But this winter is just the latest chapter in a story that began over 2 million years ago during the Pleistocene epoch, when colossal glaciers advanced and retreated across this land. It's not just a bit of snow and a few frosty mornings. Imagine a time when ice sheets, thousands of feet thick, crept southward, grinding mountains into valleys and gouging out the basins that would become Montana's lakes. We're talking about a level of cold that is actively trying to kill you. The glaciers didn't just freeze the land, they sculpted it, leaving behind moraines, erratic boulders, and the fertile valleys that define Montana today. Winter here isn't a season, it's a siege, and that siege began with the relentless advance of ice, which bulldozed forests, redirected rivers, and even created the dramatic Flathead and Bitterroot valleys. It can start as early as October and not release its icy grip until April or even May in the mountains. The legacy of those ancient glaciers lingers in the unpredictable weather and the rugged terrain. For more than 200 days a year, the temperature somewhere in the state will drop below freezing. Scientists say this is partly because the land, once compressed by ice, still radiates cold and the valleys trap frigid air. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a fundamental fact of life that dictates everything. Local legends tell of ancient spirits riding the northern winds, a reminder of the time when the land itself was alive with moving ice. The cold here is legendary, and it's a direct inheritance from the glaciers that once ruled this place. The state holds the record for the lowest temperature ever recorded in the lower 48 states, a mind-numbing -69 degrees Fahrenheit observed near Helena. Scientists believe the unique geography carved by glaciers helps trap cold air, making these extremes possible. That's not a temperature, it's a weapon. The wind that howls across the plains is the same wind that once swept over endless fields of ice. At that level of cold, exposed skin freezes in seconds, metal becomes brittle, and starting a car is a small miracle. The land remembers the ice, and it shows no mercy. Even a normal winter day can mean temperatures of 20 below zero, a cold that seeps into your bones and makes simple tasks like walking to the mailbox a dangerous expedition. You don't just dress for the weather in Montana. You arm yourself against it, just as the earliest inhabitants did, learning to read the land and respect its icy moods. This brutal climate has shaped the state's history and its character. The first people to settle here told stories of the great white blanket that covered the earth, a legend inspired by the endless snows and the memory of glaciers. The winter of 1886 to 1887 is infamous. An unimaginably harsh season of blizzards and extreme cold wiped out an estimated 60% of the state's cattle. That's more than 362,000 animals frozen to death on the plains. It was a catastrophe that bankrupted ranchers and fundamentally changed the way agriculture operated. That winter serves as a constant reminder that in Montana nature is not your friend. It is a powerful, indifferent force that can and will destroy you if you don't show it the proper respect. The land's glacial scars are a warning etched in stone and ice. Living with this kind of weather requires a different mindset. The old stories say that only those who listen to the land and prepare for its fury will survive. It demands resilience, preparation, and a healthy dose of stubbornness, traits passed down from those who have survived the ice ages and the legendary winters that followed. You have to be prepared for power outages, for being snowed in for days, and for the sheer psychological grind of living in the dark and the cold for half the year. The long, brutal winters are a filter. They weed out the people who are not cut out for this life. It's one of the biggest reasons why, despite its beauty, the state remains so empty. a land shaped by ice and ruled by those who can endure it. Many people come for the glorious summers, but they are driven out by the punishing reality of the winters, a reality written in the rocks, the rivers, and the ancient scars left by the glaciers that made Montana what it is today. Montana isn't just big, it's isolated. The sheer scale of the land is almost impossible to grasp until you're in the middle of it, surrounded by nothing but wind, sky, and the endless roll of prairie. The towns are like tiny islands of civilization adrift in a vast sea of prairie and mountains. Each one is a dot on the map, separated from its neighbors by hours of empty road. The distances between them are immense, and a trip to the next town over can be a multi-hour expedition. In the early days, these journeys were even more daunting. Settlers and ranchers would travel by wagon or horseback, braving unpredictable weather and rough terrain. This geographic remoteness defines daily life in a way that people from more crowded places can't possibly imagine. Even today, a simple errand can mean hours on the road, and in winter those roads can vanish beneath snowdrifts. One study identified the town of Glasgow, in eastern Montana, as the most remote place in the entire continental United States. In the late 1800s, the arrival of the railroad was a lifeline, but even then, the sense of isolation never truly disappeared. From Glasgow, it takes a 4.5-hour drive to reach the nearest city with a population of more than 75,000 people. Think about that. In the days before highways, that journey could take days, not hours. 4.5 hours, just to get to a small city. For generations, this distance has shaped the way people live, work, and connect. This isn't just a quirky fact, it has real-world consequences. Supplies run low and restocking can take days. In the past, a missed delivery could mean going without essentials for weeks. Need to buy a specific part for your tractor? That might be a 200-mile round trip. In the early 20th century, ranchers would sometimes send a neighbor on horseback to fetch a part, hoping the weather would hold. Even today, a simple repair can mean hours behind the wheel, crossing empty land where cell service is spotty and help is far away. Want to go to a major concert or a professional sports game? You're probably looking at a full day of driving or a flight. In the past, such events were rare treats, and entire communities might organize a trip together, turning the journey into an adventure. Today, the distances remain, and the sense of separation is as strong as ever. 4 of the 10 most isolated towns in the country are located in Montana and its equally empty neighbor, Nevada. These places are more than just dots on a map. They are outposts, each with its own story of endurance. Many of these communities are incredibly small, with populations of just 100 or 200 people. In the early days, a single general store or post office was the lifeline for miles around. They are tight-knit, certainly, but they are also profoundly cut off from the rest of the world. Stories abound of blizzards that left towns isolated for weeks, with only the radio to connect them to the outside. Life moves at a different pace because it has to. When the nearest neighbor is miles away and the next town is a day's journey, patience and self-reliance become second nature. In some of the most extreme corners of the state, the isolation is even more stark. There are stories of mail carriers braving blizzards to deliver letters, and ranchers digging out roads by hand after a storm. Places like Polebridge up in Flathead County are so far off the beaten path that they don't even have power lines. In the early days, lanterns and wood stoves were the only comforts against the long, dark winters. Residents rely on generators and solar panels for electricity. The hum of a generator is a familiar sound, and every bit of energy is precious. Many of the roads leading to these hamlets aren't paved. In spring, the mud can swallow a truck. In winter, snow can make them impassable for days. They are gravel or dirt tracks that can become impassable in winter snow or spring mud. There are tales of ranchers stringing ropes between buildings so they wouldn't get lost in a blizzard. Living in these places is a deliberate choice to disconnect from the modern world, but it's a choice that comes with a host of challenges. Every winter, the same questions return. Do we have enough firewood, enough food, enough fuel? You have to be completely self-reliant because help is a very, very long way away. In emergencies, neighbors become lifelines, and every man learns to handle a crisis on his own. This tyranny of distance shapes the culture of the state. It forges bonds between neighbors and a sense of camaraderie that comes from shared hardship. It fosters a powerful sense of independence and a can-do attitude because you have no other choice. If something breaks, you learn to fix it yourself, just as the old-timers did with baling wire and ingenuity. If something breaks, you learn to fix it yourself. There's no waiting for a specialist to arrive from the city. If you get stuck in a snowdrift, you better know how to get yourself out. Stories of men digging out their own trucks or walking miles for help are part of Montana's lore, but it also creates a barrier. The vastness can be a wall as much as a window. It makes it difficult for businesses to operate, for services to be delivered, and for people to feel connected to the wider world. In the past, a single delivery could mean the difference between prosperity and hardship. The beautiful, wide-open spaces that define Montana are the very same thing that carves it up into a collection of lonely, far-flung outposts. The tyranny of distance is both a challenge and a badge of honor, woven into the fabric of life on the high plains. Section 5. The doctor will see you. Eventually, healthcare on the frontier. In Montana, getting sick or injured is more than just an inconvenience. It can be a test of endurance and luck. For many, the nearest help is far beyond the next hill, and the journey to care is a story in itself. The same breathtaking distances that make Montana beautiful also create a healthcare crisis. Towns are separated by miles of open land, and between them, the silence can be deafening, especially when you need help fast. About a third of the state's population lives in rural areas. For these folks, getting medical care isn't just a matter of hopping in the truck and heading down the road. It's a logistical challenge that can take up an entire day. Forget about a quick drive to the local clinic. In some places, the nearest doctor is over 100 miles away, and the road between is long, lonely, and often treacherous in winter. Imagine a rancher waking before dawn, driving hours across empty highways just for a routine checkup or a specialist visit. For many, this is the reality, a journey that eats up time, money, and energy. By the time you arrive, you've already spent half a day on the road, and after a 20-minute appointment, there's nothing to do but turn around and make the long drive home. The stress of this ordeal weighs heavily on people. Many put off care, hoping minor aches don't turn into something worse. But sometimes waiting isn't an option. Emergencies are where the frontier's isolation becomes most dangerous. When disaster strikes, a heart attack, a farm accident, a car crash on a remote road, every minute counts. In nearly half of Montana's emergency departments, there's no doctor on duty around the clock. Instead, nurses and physician assistants stand ready, doing their best with what they have, while a doctor is only a phone call away. In one small town, a physician assistant recalls a night when a rancher was brought in after a tractor accident. With no doctor on site, the team stabilized him as best they could, relaying vital signs over the phone to a physician in a city hours away. The ambulance ride to a fully staffed hospital took nearly 2 hours, and every second felt like a lifetime. For families, the wait is agonizing. The knowledge that the nearest hospital with a full-time emergency physician is 2 hours away turns every emergency into a race against time. The so-called golden hour for trauma care is a cruel joke here. By the time you reach a hospital with the right staff and equipment, that window may have closed. The shortage of medical professionals is a daily reality. In some clinics, a single nurse or assistant covers the night shift, hoping nothing too serious comes through the door. The situation is only getting worse. Rural hospitals are closing wings, shutting down beds, and struggling to keep the lights on. Across the state, hospitals that once served as lifelines for entire counties are now fighting to survive. In some towns, the hospital is little more than a memory, a boarded-up building and a story told by old-timers. Many facilities have been forced to cut services, surgery, physical therapy, even basic diagnostics because they simply can't afford to keep them running. A quarter of Montana's hospitals are at risk of closing down completely, leaving entire regions without any local care. Since 2005, a wave of closures has swept across rural America. The financial pressures on these small, vital facilities are immense. Shrinking reimbursements, rising costs, and a population spread too thin to keep the doors open. When a rural hospital closes, it's more than just a longer drive for care. It's the loss of a community anchor, a place where neighbors gathered, where lives were saved, and where hope was kept alive. This healthcare desert is a direct result of Montana's low population density. The land is vast, the people are few, and the economics rarely add up. It's simply not profitable to operate a fully equipped hospital for a handful of people scattered across hundreds of square miles. So folks make do with what they have. They learn to live with aches and pains, put off checkups, and hope that nothing serious ever happens. For many, the cost of a single medical emergency can mean financial ruin. It's a gamble that many are forced to take every single day. The stunning mountain views offer little comfort when you're facing a medical crisis and the nearest help is 100 miles of empty road away. The story of healthcare on the Montana frontier is one of grit, resilience, and self-reliance. From the earliest days when traveling doctors made house calls on horseback to today's overworked nurses and physician assistants, the struggle to provide care in this vast land has never been easy. In Montana, self-reliance isn't just a virtue. It's a necessity born of isolation. And the frontier spirit lives on in every clinic, every ambulance, and every long, lonely drive to the nearest hospital. Here's another one of Montana's baffling contradictions. Despite the low wages and struggling economy, the cost of living is actually higher than the national average. As of 2025, it costs about 5% more to live in Montana than in the average American state. So not only are you earning less money, but the money you do have doesn't go as far. A single person needs about $2,600 a month just to get by, and a family of four needs over $5,700. These are big numbers for a state where the median household income is below the national average and many jobs are in low-paying service industries. The expenses pop up in places you might not expect. Utilities, for instance, are more expensive here. The average monthly electricity bill is around $125, compared to the US average of about $118. That might not sound like much, but it adds up, especially during the long, dark, and brutally cold winters when the heating is on constantly. But the real shocker is the cost of internet. In a world where reliable internet is no longer a luxury but a necessity for work, school, and basic communication, Montanans pay a fortune for some of the worst service in the country. The average monthly bill is a staggering $123 compared to the national average of just $80. You end up paying more for less. You pay a premium for slow, unreliable internet service simply because of the cost of running cables across such vast, empty distances. The same principle applies to many other goods and services. Everything has to be trucked in from farther away, and that transportation cost gets passed on to the consumer. So your groceries cost more, the parts for your car cost more, and ordering anything online comes with hefty shipping fees. It's a constant slow drain on your wallet, a tax for the privilege of living in a beautiful but inconvenient place. This combination of low wages and a high cost of living creates a relentless financial squeeze. It makes it incredibly difficult for people to save money, to invest in their homes, or to get ahead in life. People are forced to make tough choices every day between necessities. The dream of a simple, affordable life in the mountains collides with the harsh reality of expensive groceries, eye-watering utility bills, and wages that haven't kept pace. The big sky might be free to look at, but living under it comes with a surprisingly high price tag. In small towns across Montana, businesses are closing their doors, unable to keep up with rising costs and dwindling customer bases. Personal accounts from residents paint a grim picture of economic hardship. Many have lost their jobs and struggle to find new ones in an economy that offers few opportunities. Community meetings often turn into discussions about how to make ends meet and support one another. The impact on communities is profound, with empty storefronts and a sense of despair hanging in the air. Statistics reveal that poverty rates in Montana are higher than the national average, with many families living below the poverty line. Healthcare costs add another layer of financial strain, with many unable to afford necessary treatments. Education expenses are also a burden, making it difficult for families to provide for their children's futures. Housing is another critical issue, with rent prices climbing and affordable housing in short supply. Local aid programs try to fill the gaps, but resources are limited and the need is great. Community initiatives and grassroots efforts are essential, but they can only do so much. The future remains uncertain, with many wondering how long they can hold on. The beauty of Montana's landscape stands in stark contrast to the economic challenges its residents face every day. The big sky might be free to look at, but living under it comes with a surprisingly high price tag. If you think the cost of living is bad, just wait until you see what that money is or isn't buying when it comes to Montana's infrastructure. The challenges here aren't just about inconvenience, they're about survival, history, and the daily grind of life on the edge of the American frontier. In December 2024, Montana's Public Works received a report card and the grades were frankly alarming. This wasn't a surprise to anyone who's lived here for a while. The state's infrastructure has been under strain for decades, a legacy of underfunding, vast distances, and a harsh climate that punishes every mile of road and every foot of pipe. The very foundations of Montana, its roads, water systems, and digital connections, are showing their age. Many of these systems were built in the post-war boom, when optimism was high and budgets were tight. Today they're crumbling, and the cracks are more than just physical. Let's start with the roads, the literal lifelines of the state. In Montana, you can drive for hours without seeing another soul, and you'll spend most of that time dodging potholes, cracks, and frost heaves. The freeze-thaw cycle here is brutal. Water seeps into tiny cracks, freezes, expands, and rips the asphalt apart. By spring, what was a smooth road in October is a minefield. In 2023, a third of the urban roads and a fifth of the rural roads were rated as being in bad shape. That's not just a statistic. It's a daily reality for anyone who commutes, hauls freight, or tries to get to the next town over. For truck drivers hauling cattle or wheat, a single pothole can mean a broken axle and a day lost on the side of the road. For a rancher heading to town for supplies, it's a gamble every time he leaves the driveway. The combination of worn-out roads, long distances, and unpredictable weather, snow, ice, sudden storms, creates a perfect storm of danger. In winter, black ice forms in the shadows, invisible until it's too late. The statistics on road safety are grim, and every local has a story. There's the ranch hand who slid off the highway during a blizzard and waited hours for help, or the trucker who hit a patch of ice and ended up in a ditch miles from the nearest tow. Montana has one of the highest rates of road fatalities in the country. 22.6 deaths for every 100,000 people. That's not just a number. It's a reflection of the risks that come with every journey. Imagine driving for hours, the only headlights for miles, knowing that if something goes wrong, help could be a long way off. It's a test of patience, skill, and sometimes luck. On these highways, you're sharing the road with 18-wheelers, herds of deer, and the ever-present threat of black ice. A single mistake can have consequences that echo for miles. And when things go wrong, tow trucks and emergency crews might be hours away, especially in the dead of winter or during a storm. The poor condition of the roads turns every drive into a gamble. Locals swap stories about the worst stretches, the hidden dips, the places where the asphalt just gives up. Maintaining this vast network is a logistical nightmare. Montana is the fourth largest state by area, but with one of the smallest populations. That means fewer taxpayers to fund repairs and more miles of road per person than almost anywhere else in America. And it's not just the surface that's a problem. Underneath, the infrastructure is just as fragile. Many of the state's water and sewer systems were installed in the 1960s, when small towns were growing and federal grants were easier to come by. These pipes, often made of cast iron or even wood in the oldest systems, are now well past their expected lifespan. Some towns still rely on water towers built by the grandfathers of today's residents. Every winter the ground freezes and shifts, putting pressure on these aging pipes. Leaks and breaks are common, and repairs can take days, especially when the nearest parts supplier is 100 miles away. A major break in a water main during a cold snap can leave an entire town without water for days. Locals fill buckets from neighbors' wells or melt snow just to get by. Upgrading these systems is a monumental task. Engineers estimate it would take billions of dollars to bring Montana's infrastructure up to modern standards, money the state simply doesn't have. So, year after year, communities patch leaks, hope for mild winters, and trust that the old pipes will last just a little longer. And then there's the internet, a modern necessity that's anything but modern in much of Montana. The state's vast distances and rugged terrain make laying fiber optic cable a technical and financial challenge. Montana officially has the slowest internet in America. In many rural areas, the only option is satellite, which is expensive, slow, and unreliable in bad weather. In an age where business, education, and even healthcare depend on a fast, stable connection, Montana is stuck in the digital, dark ages. Local business owners tell stories of losing customers because they can't process credit cards or upload documents. Students fall behind when video lessons buffer or drop out entirely. Trying to run a remote business or attend online classes is an exercise in frustration. Video calls freeze, files take hours to upload, and outages are a fact of life. For many, the only way to get a reliable connection is to drive to the nearest town library or coffee shop, if it's open, and if the weather allows. This digital divide leaves Montanans isolated, cut off from opportunities that others take for granted. It's not just about convenience, it's about being able to compete, learn, and connect in the 21st century. In Montana, the infrastructure is a daily reminder that life here is still a frontier experience, one that demands resilience, resourcefulness, and a willingness to face challenges head-on every single day. Montana's beauty is matched only by its extremes. As if the brutal winters and crumbling roads weren't enough, the state faces a relentless and often invisible threat: fire. But not just the wildfires that sweep through forests. Here, the very ground beneath your feet can ignite. Forest fires are a familiar danger in Montana, with thick pine forests and dry summers creating a perfect recipe for disaster. But there's a stranger, more insidious kind of fire lurking below. In the eastern plains, a bizarre and dangerous phenomenon occurs. The ground itself can catch fire. This isn't just a freak accident, it's a natural disaster with deep scientific roots. Eastern Montana sits atop vast underground coal seams, some of which are exposed at the surface by erosion or human activity. These seams are made of lignite and subbituminous coal, which are particularly prone to spontaneous combustion. When oxygen reaches these coal seams, whether through a landslide, river erosion, or mining, the coal can begin to oxidize. This chemical reaction generates heat, and if the heat isn't dissipated, the coal can ignite, starting a fire that burns underground. These underground fires are nearly impossible to extinguish. They can smolder for years, even decades, silently consuming the earth from below. The ground above may look normal, but just beneath the surface, temperatures can soar to hundreds of degrees. These smoldering coal seams are like hidden time bombs. The danger is ever present, and the signs, cracks in the earth, wisps of smoke, are easy to miss until it's too late. All it takes is a hot, windy day for one of these underground fires to break through to the surface, igniting the dry grasses and forests above. The result can be catastrophic. In 2021, this exact scenario played out. An underground coal seam fire ignited the Richard Spring Fire, which would become the largest single fire in Montana's recorded history. The Richard Spring Fire scorched nearly 173,000 acres, destroying homes, killing livestock, and leaving a blackened, desolate landscape in its wake. The fire's rapid spread was fueled by strong winds and parched conditions, overwhelming local firefighting crews. The aftermath was devastating. Ranchers returned to find their land unrecognizable, with herds decimated and livelihoods destroyed. The scars of the fire remain etched into the landscape and the memories of those who call it home. The very ground that people live and work on can become their enemy. In some communities, smoke seeps up from the earth, forcing residents to monitor the ground for signs of heat and instability. Wildfire season has become a terrifying new reality. Firefighters, many of them volunteers, train year-round to respond at a moment's notice, risking their lives to protect their neighbors and the land. Summers are getting hotter and drier, a trend confirmed by climate scientists. Drought conditions leave grass and timber tinder dry, and lightning storms can spark new blazes in an instant. In the summer of 2021, Montana recorded 458 separate wildfires, a 10-year record. The scale of the disaster stretched resources thin, with fire crews from across the region called in to help. For weeks, the sky was choked with smoke. The sun became a dim orange ball, and the air was hazardous to breathe. Schools closed, and outdoor work ground to a halt as air quality plummeted. Residents live with the constant threat of evacuation. Many keep emergency bags packed, ready to leave at a moment's notice if the wind shifts or a new fire breaks out nearby. The forests that draw people to Montana can transform into deadly infernos overnight. The transition from tranquil wilderness to raging firestorm can happen in hours. This threat is not going away. In fact, it's growing. Underground coal seam fires continue to smolder, and each year brings new challenges. After a series of wildfires in 2012, scientists estimated that around 1,500 different coal seams were burning underground in Montana. These fires can migrate, sometimes surfacing miles from their origin. By 2024, wildfires once again tore across the landscape, destroying more land and more homes. Firefighters and local leaders coordinated evacuations, set up emergency shelters, and worked tirelessly to contain the blazes. Communities have responded with resilience. Volunteer fire departments have grown, and neighbors band together to clear brush, create fire breaks, and support those who lose everything. Yet, the risk remains. Every resident must be prepared for the possibility that everything they own could be consumed by flames. The sense of vulnerability is ever present. It's a heavy burden to bear, knowing that the spectacular wilderness that surrounds you is also a tinderbox, waiting for a single spark from the earth or the sky to erupt. In Montana, the line between paradise and disaster is razor thin, and the story of fire is written into the land itself. Across Montana, the landscape tells a story of change, one shaped by the relentless departure of its youth and the steady rise of cattle ranching. The challenges are many: sky-high housing prices, punishing winters, vast distances between communities, and a job market that offers little hope for those just starting out. For many young men growing up here, the decision to leave is not made lightly, but it is made often. They spend their formative years surrounded by breathtaking mountains and endless plains, yet they also witness the economic stagnation that grips their hometowns. The promise of a better life elsewhere becomes impossible to ignore, so they load up their cars, say goodbye to the familiar, and set out for distant cities, places where jobs are plentiful, wages are higher, and the winters perhaps a little less harsh. This migration is not just a trickle, it's a steady flow that has reshaped the very fabric of Montana's society. The consequences are visible everywhere. Schools that once echoed with the sounds of children now stand half empty. Main streets, once bustling, are lined with shuttered businesses and faded signs. The population that remains is aging rapidly. Montana now holds the distinction of being the oldest state west of the Mississippi River. More than half of its residents are over 40, making it the 9th oldest state in the nation by average age. The social fabric is changing, with fewer young men to carry on local traditions or start new businesses. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the small towns scattered across the eastern plains. These communities, once vibrant, are shrinking year after year. This is part of a long-term trend known as the depopulation of the Great Plains. Over the 20th century, some counties lost as much as 75% of their population. The exodus has left behind empty farmhouses, silent grain elevators, and vast stretches of land with barely a soul in sight. Take Sydney, for example. In just 3 years, its population dropped from over 6,300 to barely above 6,100. Each year, more young men leave, seeking futures that their hometowns can no longer provide. As the youth depart, schools consolidate or close, businesses shutter, and the towns themselves begin to fade from the map. The economic impact is profound. Fewer workers, less innovation, and a shrinking tax base that makes it harder to maintain even basic services. Yet in the western part of the state, a different story is unfolding. Here, the scenic mountain towns are experiencing a surge of new arrivals. Many of these newcomers are remote workers, often young men from other states, drawn by the promise of adventure and the ability to work from anywhere. Their arrival brings new energy, but also drives up housing prices, making it even harder for locals to stay. The result is a state divided, the East aging and emptying, and the West younger, growing, and increasingly expensive. This demographic split is reshaping Montana's economy and culture. Despite the influx in the West, Montana remains one of the most sparsely populated states in the country. The land stretches on, vast and empty, with more open space than people. But if you look closely, you'll see that the land is far from empty. Instead of people, it's cattle that dominate the landscape. As of 2024, Montana is home to over 2 million head of cattle. The cattle industry has become the backbone of the state's rural economy, filling the void left by departing residents. With a human population of just over 1.1 million, there are nearly 2 cows for every person. This ratio is more than a statistic. It's a symbol of the state's transformation. The rise of cattle ranching has deep economic and social implications. Ranching provides stability in a region where other industries have faltered, and it shapes the daily rhythms of life for those who remain. At its core, Montana is still an agricultural state. The work is hard, the hours long, and the rewards uncertain, but for many, it is a way of life that endures even as the world changes around them. Farming and ranching are woven into Montana's identity, even if they no longer employ the majority. The legacy of the land is carried forward by those who choose to stay and work it. The image of the cowboy and the cattle drive is not just a relic of the past. It remains a living tradition, a testament to the resilience and independence of Montana's people, especially its men, who have long been the backbone of ranching life. All these forces, the aging population, the steady departure of the young, the arrival of new wealth, and the overwhelming presence of cattle, combine to create a state that is both beautiful and complex, shaped by economic realities and social change. Montana's beauty is undeniable, but it comes at a cost. To thrive here requires toughness, resilience, and increasingly the resources to weather the challenges of a land where cattle now outnumber people, and the future is as open and uncertain as the plains themselves. Montana's history is deeply intertwined with the lives and legacies of its Native American tribes. Long before European settlers arrived, the land was home to diverse and thriving communities, each with its own unique culture, traditions, and way of life. Today, these tribes continue to play a vital role in shaping the state's identity and preserving its natural landscapes. The Crow, Blackfeet, Salish, Kootenai, Assiniboine, Sioux, and Northern Cheyenne are just a few of the prominent tribes that have called Montana home for centuries. Their ancestral lands span vast areas of the state, from the sweeping plains to the rugged mountain ranges. These lands are not just territories. They are sacred spaces imbued with cultural and spiritual significance. Despite facing historical challenges, including displacement and forced assimilation, Montana's Native American communities have remained resilient. Tribal lands today are governed by sovereign nations, each with its own leadership and governance structures. These tribal governments work tirelessly to protect their lands, advocate for their people, and preserve their rich cultural heritage. The impact of Native American culture on Montana is profound. Traditional practices such as hunting, fishing, and gathering continue to sustain communities and connect them to the land. Powwows and other cultural events celebrate tribal heritage, bringing together people from all walks of life to honor traditions that have been passed down through generations. Montana's geography is also deeply influenced by its Native American heritage. Many of the state's natural landmarks bear names that reflect their indigenous origins. Places like the Beartooth Mountains, named for their distinctive shape resembling a bear's tooth, carry stories and meanings that are integral to the tribe's histories. In recent years, there has been a growing recognition of the importance of preserving Native American languages and traditions. Educational programs and cultural initiatives aim to revitalize these languages, ensuring that they are passed on to future generations. This revival is not just about preserving the past, it's about empowering Native American communities to shape their own futures. The relationship between Montana's Native American tribes and the land is one of stewardship and respect. Tribal leaders emphasize the importance of sustainable practices, recognizing that the health of the land is directly tied to the well-being of their people. This perspective offers valuable insights into environmental conservation and highlights the need for a balanced approach to natural resource management. As Montana continues to evolve, the contributions of its Native American communities remain a cornerstone of the state's cultural and geographical landscape. Their stories, traditions, and resilience serve as a powerful reminder of the enduring connection between people and the land. In a state where the past and present are in constant dialogue, the legacy of Montana's Native American tribes stands as a testament to the strength and vitality of their enduring heritage. Montana's rugged landscape is laced with veins of precious metals, a fact that would forever alter its destiny. The late 19th century saw prospectors streaming in, lured by rumors of glittering gold hidden beneath the mountains and in the beds of icy streams. The gold rush began in earnest in the 1860s, with Bannock and Virginia City erupting overnight into bustling boomtowns. Miners staked claims, panned creeks, and dug deep into the earth, hoping to strike it rich. But gold was only the beginning. Silver, copper, and coal soon followed, each triggering its own wave of feverish activity. Nowhere was this more apparent than in Butte, known as the richest hill on earth. By the turn of the 20th century, Butte's mines churned out vast quantities of copper, powering America's growing cities and fueling the rise of the electric age. Yet, Montana's mining story is not just one of fortune. The booms brought busts. When veins ran dry or prices plummeted, towns emptied almost as quickly as they had filled. Today, the hills are dotted with ghost towns, silent remnants of dreams won and lost. The environmental legacy of mining is equally profound. Open pits, tailings, and polluted waterways are scars that remain on the landscape, reminders of the price paid for progress. Efforts to clean up and restore these lands are ongoing, but the story of Montana's mining days is written in both prosperity and consequence. Still, the spirit of those early prospectors endures. Mining remains a part of Montana's economy and identity, woven into the fabric of its history and shaping the land as surely as the glaciers and winds that came before. Montana's vast wilderness is home to some of North America's most iconic wildlife. Towering bison roam the sweeping prairies, their shaggy silhouettes a living symbol of the American West. Once driven to the brink of extinction, these giants now graze in protected areas like Yellowstone and the National Bison Range, shaping the grasslands as they have for millennia. In the deep forests and rugged mountain ranges, grey wolves prowl, stealthy, intelligent, and essential to the balance of the ecosystem. Their return to Montana has sparked both celebration and controversy, but their presence keeps elk and deer populations in check, allowing forests and rivers to thrive. Not far behind, the mighty grizzly bear reigns as the true titan of the wild. With their immense power and keen senses, grizzlies are at the top of the food chain, playing a vital role in dispersing seeds and regulating prey. Black bears, too, are a common sight, foraging for berries and fish along Montana's many waterways. These creatures are more than just inhabitants, they are architects of the land. Their movements and behaviors shape entire ecosystems, influencing everything from plant growth to river flows. Yet their survival is never guaranteed. Habitat loss, encroaching development, and climate change threaten their future, making conservation efforts crucial. Montana's wild giants are a testament to resilience and the enduring power of nature. Their stories are woven into the land, as vital to its identity as the mountains and rivers themselves. Beneath Montana's endless sky, a network of steel rails stretches across the land, binding far-flung towns and distant ranches to the rest of America. The coming of the railroad in the late 19th century transformed Montana from an isolated frontier to a crossroads of opportunity. Tracks carved through the Rockies and spanned the sweeping plains, overcoming daunting terrain with feats of engineering. Bridges spanning yawning ravines and tunnels bored through solid stone. The Great Northern Railway, one of the most ambitious projects of its time, pushed westward from St. Paul, Minnesota to Puget Sound, cutting straight through Montana's heart. Along these rails, steam locomotives thundered, carrying cattle, copper, and coal to distant markets. Towns sprang up overnight beside the tracks, each hoping to become the next booming hub. Some thrived, others faded into ghostly silence when the trains stopped coming. Railroads didn't just move goods, they moved people and ideas. The Iron Horse brought settlers, prospectors, and dreamers, connecting remote communities to the world beyond the mountains. Technical marvels like the Marius Pass, discovered in 1889, allowed trains to traverse the Continental Divide at one of its lowest points, a triumph of surveying and persistence. Today, freight trains still rumble across Montana's vastness, hauling grain, oil, and lumber. Passenger service is rare, but the rails remain a lifeline, a testament to the vision and grit that shaped the treasure state. Montana's railroads are more than transportation. They are the enduring arteries that keep the state's distant corners linked, echoing with the whistle of history. Montana is a land of breathtaking beauty, but its climate is as fierce as its landscapes are grand. Here the weather is not just a backdrop. It's a constant force shaping every aspect of life. Winters arrive early and linger late, blanketing the plains and mountains in snow and ice. Temperatures routinely plunge below zero, with brutal blizzards rolling in from the north. Ranchers and farmers brace for months of hardship, tending livestock through whiteout conditions and digging out from drifts that can swallow a pickup truck. But winter is only half the story. When the snow finally melts, the pendulum swings to the other extreme. Summers in Montana can be short, hot, and dry, Drought is a persistent threat, turning pastures brown and rivers into trickles. Wildfires sparked by lightning or a stray ember can sweep across thousands of acres in a single day, leaving behind scorched earth and smoke-filled skies. These climate extremes test the resilience of everyone who calls Montana home. Crops must be chosen with care, hardy grains and hay that can survive late frosts or sudden hailstorms. Water conservation becomes a way of life, with every drop precious during parched summers. For those living off the land, the weather is a daily gamble, one that shapes the rhythm of work, the fortunes of harvest, and the stories passed down around the fire. In Montana, the elements are never far away. They carve the landscape, dictate the seasons, and remind all who live here that nature, not man, is still in charge beneath the big sky. Montana's story isn't written just in mountains and prairies, it's etched in water. The state is home to some of the most iconic rivers in North America, the mighty Missouri, the Yellowstone, the Flathead, and the Clark Fork. These rivers carve through deep canyons, meander across open plains, and feed a network of sparkling lakes. Flathead Lake, Fort Peck Reservoir, and hundreds of alpine gems hidden among the peaks. For the ecosystem, these waterways are vital arteries. They nourish forests and grasslands, provide critical habitat for trout, elk, and bald eagles, and sustain migratory routes for countless species. In spring, runoff from melting snow swells the rivers, breathing life into the valleys and replenishing the land. Montana's rivers and lakes are also the heart of recreation. Anglers from around the world come to cast for wild trout in crystal-clear currents. Kayakers and rafters brave the white water, while boaters and campers soak in the serenity of a summer day on the water. These experiences draw visitors and their dollars, fueling a tourism economy that supports small towns and preserves open spaces. But the rivers are more than playgrounds. They irrigate fields, power hydroelectric dams, and provide drinking water to communities across the state. Managing these precious resources is a balancing act, one that requires careful stewardship to support agriculture, recreation, and wildlife, especially as drought and development put increasing strain on the system. In Montana, water is more than a resource. It's the lifeblood of the land, connecting past and present wilderness and civilization in a state where every drop counts. Montana's wide-open landscapes and big skies aren't just postcard perfect, they're also a goldmine for renewable energy. With some of the strongest and most consistent winds in the nation, Montana has become a prime target for wind farm development. Turbines now dot the prairies, their blades spinning steadily as they generate electricity for thousands of homes across the northwest. But it's not just wind. Montana's vast, sun-drenched plains and high elevations make it a contender in the solar energy race. While solar installations are still modest compared to neighboring states, falling technology costs and supportive local policies are opening the door for more panels to join the landscape. Of course, Montana has long relied on water for power. Hydroelectric dams on the Missouri and other rivers have provided a backbone of clean electricity for decades, fueling both local communities and the wider grid. These projects, while efficient, come with their own set of challenges, balancing energy needs with environmental impacts, fish migration, and the changing climate. Yet the road to a renewable future isn't without obstacles. Montana's sheer size and remote population centers make it tough to build and maintain transmission lines. Energy storage remains a technical hurdle, with wind and solar output fluctuating with the weather. And while renewables promise jobs and investment, they also spark debates over land use, wildlife impacts, and the future of traditional industries. Despite these challenges, the opportunities are real. Renewable energy can diversify Montana's economy, attract new industries, and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. And as technology advances, the state's natural assets, wind, sun, and water, offer the promise of a cleaner, more resilient energy future. In Montana, the pursuit of renewable energy is more than a trend. It's a chance to harness the very forces that shape the land, forging a new legacy beneath the endless sky. Beyond its wild landscapes and big sky horizons, Montana's true character pulses through its small towns. Scattered across valleys and plains, these tight-knit communities are the backbone of the state, where handshakes still seal deals and neighbors are more like extended family. Traditions run deep here, from annual rodeos that draw crowds from miles around to county fairs where livestock, pie contests and blue ribbons take center stage. Montana's small towns celebrate the rhythms of rural life. In the fall, harvest festivals fill the air with the scent of fresh hay and roasting corn, while winter brings ice fishing derbies and bonfire gatherings beneath the stars. Local parades are a highlight, featuring everything from classic tractors to marching bands, each event a showcase of hometown pride. High school sports are more than just games. They're community rituals, packing bleachers with spirited fans and uniting townsfolk under a common banner. Community halls and churches serve as gathering spots for potlucks, bingo nights and story swaps, places where tales of the land and its history are passed down with every shared meal. Volunteer fire departments, 4-H clubs and hunting lodges foster camaraderie and a sense of duty, with residents stepping up to lend a hand whenever needed. In Montana's small towns, tradition isn't just remembered, it's lived day by day. These customs, festivals, and the spirit of togetherness form the quiet heartbeat of Big Sky country, echoing across generations and reminding all who pass through that in Montana, community is everything. Montana's forests have long shaped the destiny of the state, their towering pines and dense stands of fir providing both challenge and opportunity. Logging began in earnest in the late 1800s, as the demand for timber soared with the construction of railroads and mining camps. Sawmills sprang up along riverbanks, their steam whistles echoing through the valleys as logs floated downstream on spring melts. Forestry quickly became one of Montana's economic powerhouses. Logging camps dotted the wilderness, with crews braving harsh winters and rugged terrain to harvest the timber that would build towns, fuel railways, and supply distant cities. The work was tough, requiring grit, teamwork, and no small amount of risk. Yet for generations it offered a livelihood that shaped the culture of entire communities. Over time, the industry evolved. The rise of conservation efforts and the creation of national forests brought new regulations and a shift towards sustainable practices. Today, forestry remains a vital part of Montana's economy, balancing resource extraction with stewardship of the land. Modern loggers use advanced equipment and careful planning to ensure the forests endure for future generations. The legacy of logging is etched into Montana's landscape, from the restored ghost towns of timber boom days to the vast tracts of managed woodland. It's a story of hard work, innovation, and an enduring bond between people and the forests that surround them, a chapter as rugged and resilient as Montana itself. In Montana, the rhythm of life has always been closely tied to the land and its wild inhabitants. Hunting and fishing are more than just pastimes here. They're woven into the very fabric of the state's culture and economy. Generations have grown up learning to track elk in the snow-dusted forests, cast lines for trout in crystal-clear streams, and respect the cycles of nature that sustain both wildlife and people. From the eastern plains to the mountain lakes, hunting seasons mark the passing of time. Families and friends gather to share knowledge, swap stories, and test their skills against wary game. The state's vast public lands offer unparalleled opportunities, drawing enthusiasts from across the country in pursuit of deer, antelope, upland birds, or the legendary Montana trout. But with these traditions comes responsibility. Montana's game laws are strict, designed to ensure healthy wildlife populations for generations to come. Hunters and anglers must follow carefully regulated seasons, bag limits, and licensing rules. Conservation tags and fees go directly into habitat restoration, fish stocking programs, and the management of healthy animal populations. Wildlife biologists and game wardens work year-round, tracking herds, monitoring fish stocks, and enforcing regulations. Their efforts, along with those of sportsmen's groups and conservation organizations, help prevent overharvesting and protect fragile ecosystems. The result is a delicate balance, one that supports a thriving outdoor recreation industry while preserving the wild heart of Montana. Out here, the pursuit of game and fish is a rite of passage, a source of sustenance, and a point of pride. It's a testament to the deep connection Montanans feel for the land, the water, and the creatures that call this place home. And as long as the rivers run and the forests stand, the traditions of hunting and fishing will remain at the core of life under the big sky.